Okay, so I was a little surprised. You were talking earlier about you initially were drawing female, characters, princesses, and then you wanted to challenge yourself by drawing male characters, which has become something that you're really known for. And the reason that I find that transition interesting is a lot of people feel exactly the opposite. I have a lot of conversations with different artists about drawing men versus drawing women. Okay, and the general consensus is that it is more difficult to draw women than it is to draw men. And one explanation that was given to me by a very good artist named Jeff Johnson, he says it's much easier to draw a dude because you can be less precise with your line and less concise with your line. Meaning that, hey, if you draw like a ruggedly good-looking man, that's something that you can do. There's sort of a harshness that's acceptable and it still looks okay. But with women, you've got to be a lot more delicate, and the features, there's much smaller parameters of sort of the aesthetics. You can't make a chin too big. You can't make the forehead too big. There's dangers involved. However, there is a different type of handsomeness other than rugged good looks. You were talking before about androgynous looking males, or which is obviously a big part of anime, or people with feminine features. And I would argue that that's just as difficult as drawing beautiful women, and that's something that you've gotten excellent at. You've really been able to draw pretty androgynous males in a way that has really elevated you to a lot of other people doing the same thing. I mean, what's your take on drawing men and women and the type of men that you like to draw, and how to be successful at that?
For me, as a female, I always think female. Period. The problem is how to draw attractive females. I mean,
Sure.
appealing to male, because the concept of beautiful or attractive from female's point of view of other females, right? It's quite different from men's point of view.
Absolutely.
So, yes, I mean, for me, I just go soft on all the features and and the muscles, and so then you have a female. But for male characters, I think the challenging part is you kind of, especially, I'm not talking about androgynous kind, but even the androgynous kind, you still want to show the part that the muscles, the anatomy of a male's anatomy, which is I have to kind of study like human anatomy to learn how to draw muscles, because very skinny guys with no muscle and very androgynous looking is not necessarily attractive, even though in Asian culture, since I'm from Asia, right? I'm from Taiwan. It's a Chinese culture, and I think during the I would say the East Asian culture circle, the androgynous feminine guys is always considered attractive back in old days and ancient time. So you sort of like to see the K-pop or even the Japanese manga, or it's all under that influence, basically, that beauty standard. So in a way, I think it's really not that difficult. Yeah, I kind of, you can't, even though I can simply just apply the androgynous feature of the female to a man, but at the same time, I don't want to do it too much. Then I feel like I'm drawing female characters with short hair instead of drawing a man. I still want to have keep the quality, male quality, in those characters, even though sometimes they can look androgynous
looking. Well, and there's also a balance too. I mean, you can draw, you talk about male anatomy, you can make selective musculature.
Right.
You can have someone who's skinny, but they got big pecs, and all of a sudden that can seem
but
attractive.
lean, muscular at the same time, right? They own conflict, but with a pretty face. I think it's androgynous face is more of an Asian culture influence.
Well, I mean, you talk about the different ways that men and women draw beautiful women, and the different views that they have, and as I see more and more female artists, become more prominent, I definitely get this sense of like a different look. It's less sexualized to me. It's difficult for me to describe, because in the old days, you've got your, Frazettas and your Frank Cho's and Art Adams, and there's definitely sort of a sexual component to the beautiful women that they draw. Not necessarily the look in their eyes, but there's something sexual about it. And like with female artists, even when they're drawing beautiful women, even like Amanda Connor drawing Power Girl, who's known for big boobs and stuff, it seems less sexual to me, and that's a good thing. It's variety, and it gives different people different stuff to gravitate towards as fans. And then conversely, I see as there's more and more female artists, and this is something that we need to get into, you're starting to see more men and muscular or even heroic characters, but drawn by female artists who are drawn sexually, and that's in the way that men were drawing women in a sexual way. And that's sort of where some of your work comes into play, with the yaoi work that you've been doing, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Yaoi, yaoi. There's a Frank Zappa song called Wowie Zowie, and I keep forcing that pronunciation on it. Yaoi.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about how you first experienced the genre, what it's about, because plenty of people don't know about it and don't know how much you've excelled in it.
Well, how should I start? Should I start with what yaoi is, or when how it started?
Sure, and then your first exposure to it. How about that?
I would say, like I mentioned before, it's for the beauty standard for male, all right? And in Asia, it's a little bit different from the Western hemisphere. And I would say, in some Asian, like all Asian literature, you can already read about, like, something they describe about males' friendship or brotherly love, and that focus on that. So there's always like a fandom, a group of people who like to write literatures related to that topic. And but it's not mainstream. So it's always like a small group of fandom following they write this kind of stuff. And later on, there's also like in modern time, the people they self-publish this type of literature. But again,
and who's the audience for this? Who's consuming this work?
Only among the small writers group or the readers who like this fandom. It's only because since it's still kind of a taboo, it's not mainstream. But it's until like in the 70s, 1976, and a girl comic book artist, her name is Takemiya Keiko, and she began to serialize a title. It's called the English version. English name is The Poem of Wind and Trees. I don't know if you know the title. It's Kaze to Kino Uta. I think that's how. Excuse my bad Japanese. And yes, and it's on the Girl magazine. It's called like Shokomi, shoujo comic, Shokomi, and it's published by Shokakukan. The publishing did a lot of famous title, and the subject, basically it just yaoi pretty much, related, which is gay romance, right? And but the story, I would say, the subject is kind of very controversial, but at the same time, it's very refreshing to the readers. So that picks up a lot of audience, or they started the trend. And although I began to read it back then when I was in high school, high school or middle school. I can remember when I was about 15 or 16. And I have to say the story is really depressing. And I can
Hmm.
tell that it's not written for kids. But back then at that time, there's no kind of a magazine because Japanese like to put similar genres on the same magazine. All the girls, you know, comics in the girl magazine, boys in the boys magazine, or youth comics. And there's no back then at that time there's no magazine.
But
That
this is in the girls' comic. The audience for
yeah,
this,
but
even though it's male gay romance, is
yeah, but
girls.
although I think the topic is more adult, I mean it's the story is more adults. It should be
Mm,
for adult female, not for
mhm.
girl, not for like middle school.
Right.
And it's very it's dark and depressing. It's very like a Lady of the Camellias,
Sure.
that type of story, and so it's so depressing that I couldn't bear reading it again after I only read it once the entire
Mhm.
time.
Do
But the
you
thing
like it?
is,
I mean,
the
do you give it?
storytelling is great.
Yeah.
And the characters, the relationship, how she just, described the relationship of the character is great. But again, it's heartbroken at the end. You see how the character, main character ended up. So
Mhm.
it's kind of depressing at the same time. So I would say, but again, later on, there are other female mangaka. They actually start, the similar topic or gay romance.
Mhm.
But they all kind of, in a way, I would say, always kind of heavy in a way. If you can understand the sense of heavy, it's
Mhm.
never really like happy, like
Light. Yeah.
yeah. And but it's all as the society becomes, more open, and then plus most of the female readers when they read manga, those books, they like to project themselves or fantasize themselves as as one of the characters. Like what women like to read romance novel. The same thing for girl comics, and that's the reason the girl comics so popular in Asia. There's the romance novel is not that well, it's popular, but not as popular as girl comics within the group of teenagers.
So
And
when projecting themselves into one of the two characters, I know there's two
yeah,
types,
the
of
other
the
character,
characters.
the
Is there one that they tend to project themselves onto more?
more
That they
the more the feminine side one, or or uke
okay, and
zero.
seme, right?
Yes. So yeah, Seme is the one who's the more playing the male role, I would say dominant role of
Right.
the relationship, and Uke the more of a feminine role of the relationship.
The
And
receiver.
yeah, so the women, so in a way, the storytelling, and it begins to develop. The trend of the storytelling kind of began to develop into more of a sweet and happy and bubbly type of thing. Because
Less dark and heavy than it used to
that's
be.
dark and heavy.
Is what it,
Yeah. So and it started from Japan, and it begins to radiate like towards Korea, Taiwan, China, Asia, eventually to the West, right? So it took a while, So by the time when I came to United States, when I immigrated to the United States, that was like in the mid 90s.
mhm.
Almost nobody know about BL or yaoi back then.
Boy love. Yes.
Boy love, yes.
Yeah.
And so, you know, so again, it's again like I mentioned before, it's the girls fantasizing attractive men having like romantic relationship, but from a very safe distance, without seeing a female competitor
Now,
being
how explicit is this? I know not everything is going to be the same. Is it or how graphic? Because you're talking about when you get to you're talking about the 70s, the origin of it, and now you're talking about the 90s. When you're coming over here, by that point, hentai is already a thing, and you got Legend of the Overfiend, and which is very graphic and very explicit. So is this, equivalent to that, or is it more,
Well,
um,
it's not
you know,
necessarily about how graphic or explicit the sex part.
mhm,
It's more of a sexual tension, I would say,
sure.
of the between the main characters. So, or I should say, moe point. If you know what moe is
Yeah.
in Japanese,
Yeah.
for if you use
Always.
moe on the female character, usually I mean so cute and lovely. Or
Right.
when you describe that on the male characters, right? It's more like affections or attractions.
Mm,
Something. It could be. You can even use that to describe a situation, not
right.
always on the characters. But so yaoi is a lot of its focus on the moistness that gets the girls all bubbly.
The
Excited.
the Maoi-ness of the uke.
Yeah, 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 yaoi just mean the
Yeah, yeah.
male relationship, and the sex part sometimes is bonus, but it's not really a must. You
I
know.
mean, in what I've seen and what you sent me, and we can show this before, it's not so much explicit as the subtext is explicit, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
what's explicitly going on beneath what this is really about. We're not showing actual sex, but it's.
Well,
So here, should
I
we?
guess
Well,
in a way it's to satisfy girls' fantasy and desire. I would say most of the readers, audience, even though it's mostly the fandom's mostly about like gay romance, but
mhm,
interesting enough, most of the readers, majority of the readers are female.
mhm. Wow.
So yeah,
And it's a difficult needle to thread. Um, talking before, like I know the androgynous nature you're saying is an Asian thing, but there's a lot of Western girls who are really taken by pretty men. It's not it's a
yeah,
pretty universal thing, I think.
it's a same thing when we just say from the male's perspective that it's two attractive females having a romance relationship.
Right.
It's more
You
it's the
know,
same kind of uh how do I say that? What is the English word? I would
the
say
same type of relationship.
not relationship. Can I use the word mentality or
Oh, I see. Yeah. Yeah,
yeah?
that makes sense. Um, so, it's not um, sort of the way that you draw men, I don't think is easy to do. I think you are really threading that needle of just draw. I was at that group that I was telling you about, um, the drink and draw, the Zoom meeting that I go to. There's this artist that I know named Kelly, and she just goes, "I want to draw hot men. I want to get good at drawing hot men." And everyone's like, "Yeah, you got to look at Jo Chen. She's the master." And like one artist that the men that you draw sort of reminded me of is Naoki Urasawa's Monster. Um,
Oh,
do
really?
you,
I thought our
well,
styles are quite different.
no, but the monster in the character is Johan, okay, and
Mm,
he's a horrible, he's the one who saved, at birth, he's got a choice which one to operate on, and he's the one who saved, and he made the wrong choice. So when you see him later, this monstrous murdering character, he is stunningly beautiful, and which is sort of antithetical to what he actually is. He is a monster, but he looks gorgeous,
yeah,
and
contrast
it,
of the plot.
yeah, that's not easy to pull off.
Once you have the passions, drawing those attractive men,
Mhm.
then you have to then a lot of study of human anatomy and practice on figure drawing and
Well,
combine it together.
also like clothing. I mean, your characters are so impeccably dressed. Like, how much time do you spend studying fashion, or do you have like Pinterest boards? Does everything just come out of you? Your imagination. Like, I know let's talk about Kim Jong-gi, never looks at reference. Everything was miraculously in his head, I
Yeah.
mean, how much reference do you use?
Oh, first of all, definitely not that level. Okay. But I also don't consider myself as the fashion type, fashionable type. So usually I'm even surprised you mentioned about fashionable.
Well,
So
here,
yeah, it's pretty much the character, the outfit that I give them is pretty straightforward, and usually
oh,
when in doubt, always make
it's nice. I mean, look at this,
oh
you're wearing this stuff.
when in doubt, always give them suit. It's the classic, and always make them wear black and white. Then you're safe. So and in a way that won't be affected by the fashion, right?
Right.
Uh, the suits is always safe.
Well, I mean, you talk about, you want to draw men the way that you want them to be, the lesson there is guys dress well. Women like that when you dress well, I guess.
Of course, well dressed.
Um,
Yeah, definitely.
so, the yaoi thing, people
But
in
yeah,
these words,
most
like
people don't
how
know
did the
that.
project come about? What is the story about? And where's it going? I know it's been going on for a while. There's a prequel. There's different aspects of the story.
Well, that's a long story. You know, it's first of all that explained why I kind of disappeared from the American comic book industry for a while, for
You know,
over a decade, because I mostly focus on that title. How do I say that? Long story. And I mentioned about, did I mention I actually, when I was a kid, you mean middle school actually, my sister and I and a bunch of friends, we formed like a comic book club
right.
back then, self-published. And one of my friend from the club, she actually introduced me yaoi or BL comics.
Mhm.
And then that's how I kind of like got me hooked up. Back then, before I was only doing again, nobody reads my comics, and you know, I was doing the shonen style. Then
Mhm.
the BL manga is just a new style to me. That's refreshing. That's interesting. Then basically, we off and on we still after we graduated from school and she immigrated to the United States. When she was in high school, and I moved on with my path, became a comic book artist, and later I also immigrated to the United States.
Mhm.
And but we still kind of keep in touch. And one time, and actually not just only that, we also self-publish something together, doing like short stories, but nothing steady. And one time I think it said 2003, she mentioned, hey, there's a convention in San Francisco. It's called the YaoiCon.
Mhm.
Do you want to check it out? And it's like, how we don't know there's a comic, like a comic book, like a giant, like a dojin convention or event in Japan, right? But they don't just do yaoi stuff. Basically, they have the female fandom and the male fandom. They combine together. Sometimes they have the convention that dedicated to the female readers, like the June, uh, but not in United States. And then we're just curious about what that is. Do they actually, what kind of programs they have? What the artist alley is going to look like? So we
Sure.
just went there and and actually check out the convention. Then after we talk to the convention, figure out what's going on, and the I have to talk to the staffs there. And the convention organizer, her name is Neko, well, nickname is Neko, and she learned that I'm a professional comic book artist. She gave us free passes. So
Mhm.
later we became friends with the convention, the founder of the YaoiCon, and she's also the organizer of the convention. And and later on we kind of like she would occasionally she would just write me, ask me, commission me to do some artwork for their
Mhm.
guests, because there's sometimes they will invite like voice actors for like video game, like Devil May
Mhm.
Cry, and they need something to sign with. So she will commission me to do some artwork. Like they can make that into posters or prints for the guests to sign. Then and and also know that she writes for fun. She likes to write yaoi fiction. Well, that's part of the reason she actually just kind of established the conventions. And so since I know she writes yaoi fictions, I mean actually back then when she was working in the military, so before the
Mhm.
convention time, career, she was like stationed overseas as a military, you know, I don't know. Actually, she was a military police. But
Mhm.
when she was bored, she actually just wrote like a yaoi fiction for fun, as a hobby, never nothing serious. So since I know that she writes and yaoi fictions, and she does that for stress relief, similar like me, draw
Mhm.
comics for stress release when I was a student or as a kid. But anyway, and at that time, I think it was like 2008, and I was writing a like original BL story manga, and I got stuck with the plot, and I need some advice and from people. And I thought, oh, since Neko she writes fiction, yaoi fiction, maybe I can just ask her for advice. So, and I consulted her, and she helped me rewrite the story, but to the point that kind of turned the story into a very dark theme and kill all the characters at the end, the main character at the end, But the thing is that at the same time, then I said, okay, that's interesting twist. I kind of like your style. Do you have other titles, that actually rewrite on your own instead of just rewrite my story? And she showed me more of her work, and then I actually, and one of the short stories she wrote, I have to say she is very keen on the dark thing,
Mhm.
not like typical, I won't say typical, mainstream, bubbly, happy ending,
Right. Well, I
BL.
mean, that's what you said the origin was,
Yeah.
when it first started, the one that read was so depressing.
But her story thing, I won't say depressing, it's cool. It's dark,
Mhm.
but the kind of, I always wanted to, it's the kind of style, the storytelling I always wanted to try, a kind of a dark, moody thing, but I'm never really good at it. And the results is always ended up in like a dark comedies or comedy period.